Chapter 13, The Secret Passage. Kino Amark. The deafening sounds of the ground erupting as the lightning bolts hit the ground filled my ears, so I had to shout to be heard. "We have to run faster," I said, pulling at Piper's hand to push her to quicken her steps. "We need to enter the forest," she said, in between breaths. "The secret passage is still very, very far. We can't go there." "Oh gods! What happened?" she said nervously, and I did not know how to respond to that. I was just as confused as she was at what was happening right now. "Just run. Keep your questions to yourself for now," I said. Our conversations made no sense anyway. The coldness of the forest took us in, and I felt safer, although my hands still shook. Piper's hand was still squeezing mine tightly. It could not end this way. Where was Mother? "If Dogan kills her, I swear I will avenge her death." But when he took her, he galloped away, which could only mean that he was trying to save her somehow. Maybe that, or, I don't know. I wanted to scream, but then again, what for? I wanted to sob. I realized that a big part of me was like a tidal wave crashing upon the shore, breaking into sea spray. The loud eruption from Canella had stopped, and the crowd had fallen silent too. Akeans could be traveling back to their provinces. Either that or they were counting their dead. I shut my eyes to push back the tears. People died because the Emperor wanted me dead. I felt numb, and yet, my heart felt like it had been dipped in icy, cold water. I could not even find the right words to describe what I was feeling. It was like I was reeling non-stop, unmindful of where I would end up afterwards. "Stop, please," Piper said, pulling at my hand. "My head is throbbing." "Let's rest for a while," I said, but I did not really mean it. Resting would mean that we would waste precious time, and we could not afford that because I had to find Mother. Where would Dogan take her? "Focus," I scolded myself. I was so lost in my scattered thoughts that I did not see the snake that slithered towards us. Piper's hand tightened against mine until my fingertips grew cold. "Kino," she said in a scared voice. "What?" I said. Piper was looking down. Then I saw it. "Don't move. It doesn't see us," I said, and this time, I was the one holding her hand tighter. Piper was shaking. The snake kept on slithering nearer. Piper's body tensed. "It's coming my way, Kino," she shrieked. When the snake passed beside her, she released my hand and lost control of her power. To my horror, she began stomping her feet. "Stop it," I shouted. "You're only scaring the snake." "No. I hate snakes. Do you see the red dots on its body?" she said hysterically. Then she danced all around the snake, her feet falling to the ground in quick, frantic beats. I gazed at the snake, and true enough, red dots were covering its entire length. "It's the Serpetus, the snake known for its venom that could kill a person in minutes." "Stop moving and make yourself invisible," I shouted frantically. I looked around, searching for a branch or a stone, something to crush the snake's head with. Finally, I found a big enough rock. I lunged towards the snake and aimed at its head. At that same moment, the snake recoiled and attacked, biting Piper's leg. "No!" I shouted. But I was too late. The snake slithered away, and I threw the rock but missed. Piper fell down, horror painting her face. "The venom, Kino," she said nervously. "It will travel up my body. If it reaches my heart—" "Stop," I said. I tore my cape in two and wrapped the torn piece around her leg. This way, the poison would not travel upwards. "Stay still," I commanded. My fingers would not stop shaking. When I was done, I pulled at Piper and held her tightly. Images of our neighbor in Wawang village flashed inside my head. The old man was bitten by a Serpetus when he left his house. After a few minutes, when his wife came after him to see what was taking him long, she screamed as she laid eyes on her husband's dead body. The proof that he was bitten by the Serpetus was the red dots found all over his body. "Don't let go of my hand even when I die, all right?" Piper whispered. I went numb. "Don't say that. You're not going to die," I said. My head's throbbing like crazy. I touched her head, and true enough, she had started to burn up. I held her close. "Piper, listen. You're not going to die, not after all this. It's just a fever. It will be better once we reach your home," I said blankly, although my chest went funny, beating slowly until coldness started to wrap around my heart. "That's a long journey," she said weakly. "I need to rest. Don't let go of my hand so you'll remain hidden. In case you find that our bodies start to show, that means I'm losing control of my power. All you have to do is wake me up so I could make us invisible again." Fever talk. This was such unfortunate timing. I wish we were visible so I could see her face. I grunted as I half carried, half dragged Piper towards a huge tree where I hoped no one would go looking for us. Stop talking. We'll rest for a while, and if you're still not better, I'll carry you back to Nivadan once I've fully rested. Piper could be dying in my arms, and I did not know what to do. There was no one around to help us, and I was starting to feel helpless. My mother was out there being pursued by soldiers, and the Emperor wanted me dead. Did he realize that Piper and I had tricked him into believing I had distanced us? Our execution was perfect. What did the Emperor see in the presentation then? My eyes moistened, and I held Piper closer. Please get better, Piper, I whispered. My voice had gone thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. I shouldn't have talked you into doing this. Don't say that, she said. Then she fell silent, as though she had lost consciousness. After a while, to my relief, she added, Don't be afraid, Kino. I'll protect you. Her voice had started to weaken, and yet I knew that she meant what she said. I clutched her tighter to me. My shoulders shook and tears escaped the corners of my eyes. This little, feverish girl wanted to protect me. Talk about irony. Mayo Kalo. That's where they went, Kogi said. I followed the Nivan, but I knew I had to do something first. Wait, I need to get out of this costume. It's slowing me down, I said. Kogi seemed annoyed, but there was nothing he could do about it. Did you see them? I asked. No, I thought Piper and Kino were headed this way, but I lost track. All of a sudden, a snake came slithering across the ground at high speed. I shouted. Look out. Kogi looked down and crushed its head with a stone. I stared at the dead snake with its smashed head. Its tail broke into a spasm before it stopped moving. I was gaping at the deadly Serpetus, and I shivered at the thought and felt a cold, tingling sensation down my spine. I found it strange that such a small snake carried immediate death to anyone in its path. Kogi, look, I said as I pointed at Kino's torn cape that was hanging on a tree branch. That's what Kino was wearing. It could only mean that they're near. Kogi looked ahead, and he also saw the torn, silver cape. Give me your hand, he said, and I obliged. Immediately, I could not see myself anymore. Piper. He shouted. Why are you shouting? You're giving away our location, I said. Piper. He shouted even louder. Stop shouting. Let's just look for them, I insisted. Listen, Mayo. Piper is a friend, and you're just an acquaintance. If she had not requested me to take you, I would have left you back in the palace to be trampled on by those soldiers. So be quiet and let me find my friend, he yelled. My eyes stung with his accusation. I wanted to find Piper and Kino too, but my ways were more careful than his, obviously. I'm sorry. Unlike you, I can't turn myself invisible, so strike me if you're mad at me, but stop biting my neck off, I grumbled. For a moment Kogi paused, and a peal of soft laughter escaped his mouth. In a lighter tone, he added, Let's just do this, all right? Stop panicking. It's not going to help us. The explosions in the palace yard were scary. Lightning shot down at us, and if I wasn't mistaken, I think Nicola was lost to the commotion. I saw her straw hat lying on the ground before I felt something pull at my body. Then I could not see myself, and I thought I had died too, so I stopped running. But then somebody spoke and told me to run or else he would leave me behind. That was Kogi. His words brought me back to reality just when I thought I had died. Mayo. A faint voice called out to me. I stopped. Did you hear that? That's Kino, I said. Kino? I shouted. I waited, and then it came again, louder this time. Help us, Mayo. Kogi let go of my hand and ran ahead to where the voice came from. I was thankful when he let go of my hand. It was difficult to run when your hands were entwined with someone else's. Ugh. I followed the voice and found Kogi already visible near a tree. I could not see Piper and Kino. Perhaps Piper was still protecting him. Then all of a sudden, I saw them. Piper was lying on the ground, and Kino looked as if he had just put her down. His eyes were bloodshot with tears. I knelt, and Kogi did the same. What happened? I asked. A Serpetus bit her, Kino said, the fear and worry evident on his face. Oh, no. I yelped. Do you have any salve? Kogi asked. But Kino shook his head. Kogi did not understand. It's a Serpetus Kino was talking about. No ointment could stop its deathly venom. Kogi felt Piper's head and recoiled. She's burning up. Not Piper too, I said, touching her hair. Kogi's lips paled. We could not lose Piper. Contrary to what he thinks, I have grown fond of her. I could not bear to watch her die in front of us. This was not how good people were supposed to die. Kino was holding Piper's hand. What do you mean, not Piper too? He asked. I saw Nicola lying on the ground. Her eyes were glazed, I murmured. Kino's eyes widened, and he looked away. No one among us was strong enough to say another word. Piper's chest rose and fell slowly. For a second, her chest would not move, and I would hold my breath until her chest started moving again. Only then did the tension leave my body, and I exhaled loudly in relief. Kino moved over towards Piper's leg. Kogi and I did as well to see what it was that caught Kino's attention. A red dot appeared on Piper's leg just below her knee. I paled. The venom was starting its deathly toll. Suddenly, it came to me. Was it even possible? Could I? Before Kogi and Kino could react, I lay beside Piper, my movements fast and perhaps a little rough. I inserted my right arm behind her neck and pushed it farther so that her head lay on my shoulder, and then I scooped her closer. I closed my eyes as I concentrated. What are you? Kogi said. Kino protested, let him do his thing. I imagined an apple dangling from a tree, a beautiful, red, luscious apple. Then I searched where the poison could have laid. I found something odd, like a slimy liquid. I sucked it out using only my mind. I sucked all of the slimes until they passed through my body. I convulsed and released Piper, my eyes veiled with darkness. I felt horrible. Why did I do this? I stood and the surroundings swirled all around me. I dropped to my knees, my stomach heaving. Kino came rushing towards me to help. He rubbed my back to make me feel better. I vomited a brown, slimy liquid that tasted like rust and smelled so putrid that when I inhaled it, it made my stomach heave a second time. It went out of my mouth for a few seconds, which felt like hours. Then it was over. I perspired, and my body felt cold. It was similar to the feeling you get when a fever breaks. Hey, Kogi said in a surprised voice. You wouldn't believe this, but Piper's fever is gone. I looked at Kino, and my grin was mirrored on his face. Cratty Dragon's ass. My power was awesome.
Kino Amark. My hand still throbbed from punching Dogen as soon as he let me off the horse. We had escaped the soldiers pursuing us, and for now we were safe. Although I was thankful that Dogen swooped me from the commotion at the palace grounds, I could not forgive him for taking me without my son. Now where would I find Kino? I have to trust my intuition. Ride off without me, Dogen, I said. I have to find my son. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye, and behind his stoic facade, he seemed to have been sulking on the inside. I sighed. I'm sorry, Dogen. He looked at me. What did you say? I said, I'm sorry. Of course you understand that it's my son we left behind. I didn't get to finish what I was about to say because Dogen had started grinning at me. Despite the turmoil of the threat to our lives, he could still smile. He was a piece of wonder. I accept, he said, and then he was back on the lookout. Everything happened so fast, and it was difficult to explain it to anyone because only Wind and I knew what caused the tragedy. Still, to wish death upon my son crossed the boundaries from being vengeful to being outright ruthless. Mad, even. But what did I expect from my former husband? Nothing less, I suppose. Dogen studied the woods behind us. We had lost the soldiers, and there was no one else trailing after us. How do you suppose we start looking for him? He asked. Kino knows that our options are either Dirella or Niveton. Dirella is too far away, and Niveton is the only place we can probably reach by tomorrow. All we have to do is get to the entrance to the secret passage of Niveton. I think we are ahead of them, so from there, we have to turn back in the hope that we can meet them halfway. That seems to be a sound plan, he said. But if we push for the secret passage and then head back, that means that we'll lose a lot of time. Can you show me where this secret passage is located? Describe it to me. I can do something better. Stop, I said. I knelt on the ground and picked up a broken twig, drawing the map of northern Akea from memory. This is where the secret passage is located, I said. And here's the Canellan Palace. If Kino keeps to his path, this is where I suppose he'll end up. I drew a straight line from one point to the other. This is where we are. If we could move on to here, we may have a good chance of finding him quicker, I finished. Dogen studied the map and he seemed to plot the markings inside his head. I'm familiar with Akea's maps too, but I can't draw it out of memory. This is indeed a good drawing. It's a lesson my father made sure I learned from Akea's best cartographer. In times like this, it proved that it was a useful lesson indeed. Come on, we have to ride harder now, Dogen said. Piper San Diego. I was nauseated, and so Kogi and Kino had to take turns carrying me on their backs. The throbbing in my head was gone and the Serpetus's bite was but a memory except for the ugly red dot on my leg. They said Mayo saved me. Unbelievable. I still felt sick, and I had yet the chance to thank Mayo. But I definitely would. A generous serving of beef jerky and roast pork would be a fitting display of my gratitude. This time, I was on Kino's back, so I could make him invisible. Kogi was probably holding Mayo's hand. We should rest, I told Kino, concerned that they had already been running and walking for hours. He shook his head. We need to reach the secret passage fast. It's a good thing the soldiers have no idea where we're going. On the other hand, they were trained to track footsteps. So even if they can't see us, they might still find us. Let's hope they don't. I hoped they would not too. I prayed my father would not be so mad at me for running away from home. I'm sleepy, Kino, I whispered. Is it all right if I doze off? He chuckled. Yes, but don't snore too loudly, or we'll find ourselves surrounded by hubbubs, he jested. I shivered because I hated hubbubs, but not as much as I feared Serpetus though. Hubbubs were as stocky as horses, but their eyes were bloodshot, and they had toothy fangs. They also had a strange smell that made people faint. Stories I heard say that hubbubs smoked tobacco and sat on the tree's branches. I never believed any of those stories. They were impossible. I wrapped my arms around Kino's neck. He was a good friend. I smiled as I rested my head against his back, his soft footsteps lulling me to sleep. When I woke up, it was because Kino had started to run. Hooves, Kogi was saying in between his breath. Kino stopped. How many? Do you think they'll find us? I don't know, a few, I think. Let's not wait and see, Kogi said. Better run and hide. I stirred and held Kino tighter. Kino was panting now, even though our speed would have made tortoises beaming with pride. I wanted to urge him to run faster, but he was probably tired of carrying me, so I just kept my mouth shut. We turned left, and the sound of hooves shifted and was now behind us. I looked back because the sound was so near. Whoever was behind us was going to catch up on us soon. Then to my surprise, I saw a woman and a burly man riding a horse. Kino. Quiet, Piper, he said. We can't be heard. It's your mother. He stopped and turned around so fast that I thought I would fall from his back. Mother? He shouted. I jumped off his back, and he became visible instantly. Mistress Lamari's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at where all the shouting was coming from. And then her face radiated like a blooming flower. She dismounted and ran towards Kino, only to wrap him in what seemed like a really tight embrace. The ugly man inched towards us on his horse. Beside me, Kogi and Mayo showed up too. It was such a lovely sight, Kino and Mistress Lamari reuniting. Mother, we have to go to Ghost Town, Kino insisted. You can't argue with me, all right? Nibatin Kino, Mistress Lamari corrected. Then she nodded, tears falling down her face. I know, she laughed softly as she brushed Kino's hair. I know, she repeated. Then she held him again and turned towards us. Hello there, she said to all of us. We smiled at her. She was so beautiful. I looked at Mayo and Kogi, and they were both blushing. I rolled my eyes and caught sight of the burly man. To my surprise, his face was also tinged crimson. Men and beautiful women. I would never understand the connection between them.
Dogen Ronda. Lamari made Piper, Kino, and Mayo ride the only horse we have. This way, they could move quicker. I wanted to protest because I wanted to protect Lamari, but I understood her reasons, and it was an argument I wouldn't win. In the same manner that I wanted to protect her, she felt twice as strongly about protecting her son. I hoped the Emperor would not come for us, although it was a remote possibility at this point, which was why I couldn't figure out why he was not yet on our tail. We had ridden for hours, but the entrance to the secret passage was still a long way. Listen up, I said. In case we meet soldiers along the way, what did I tell you? I asked. Gallop away, Mayo said. Right, I responded. There's no turning back. Head straight. If you can't make the horse invisible, then leave the horse behind, and run as fast as possible. Don't stop. I'll protect Lamare. I said it loud enough for each of them to hear, even though I only meant it for Kino's ears. I knew that he would get worried, and he may come running back for us. He looked at me as if measuring the truth in what I said. I will not let anything happen to your mother, I repeated to him. He nodded and looked at Lamare, who walked towards the horse and stopped beside it. Kino, she said. I'll come after you, don't worry. Everything will be fine as soon as we reach Nivedon. To my horror, Kino climbed down from the horse and hugged his mother. His innocent face crumpled as a fresh batch of tears escaped his eyes. Mom, why did he said in between sobs. Why does the Emperor want me dead? Lamare's face went ashen as she held Kino so tightly to her. She was dropping kisses on his head. Soon she raised a hand to brush the tears that had streamed down her face. She was shaking her head in a fast rhythm. She opened her mouth as though to say something, but no words came out. It was just a trick, Mother. I don't have any power. Can we go back and tell him that? It was me, Mistress Lamare, the little ghost girl piped in. I was making the box float. It was my fault. Then she cried too. The fat boy jumped down the horse and rushed to Lamare too. I'm sorry, Mistress Lamare. It was me, he said as his face contorted as though he was trying hard not to cry. I was the one who convinced Kino to present a power. Then there were no other words after that as the fat kid started bawling like a baby. I sighed. None of what happened in the palace could have been any of these children's faults. Listen to me, Lamare said. Come. She gestured to the other children until all were close to her, and they were all arms around each other. Lamare eyed them as she spoke. None of what happened was your fault. Remember that. Nothing could make the Emperor that mad and have it attributed to what a mere child did. She paused, so don't even think about it, all right? I am accountable for all these things. I will settle this with the Emperor myself. I watched them for a while and at the same time, kept track of how long we had been standing there. The entire time that we were immobile meant that the soldiers could be gaining distance on us. We had to move soon. Lamare, I said. It's time for us to leave. Lamare broke off from the hug, kissing all the children to let them know that they shouldn't blame themselves for anything that happened. She ushered the children to the horse and when all had settled, she moved farther back to let the horse pass, not breaking her gaze from Kino. Then she did a double take, ran towards him, and stopped beside the horse. She stepped on the stirrup hanging below the saddle. She was holding Kino in an instant. I love you, Kino. Don't ever forget that, she said and kissed him on both cheeks. I love you too, Mother, Kino replied. Then Lamare stepped off the bay. Kogi, I said. You're a grown man. Don't let anything happen to them. Kogi nodded. It is my honor to protect them. Then he became invisible. I could only guess that he walked after them. Lamare stood beside me. Don't you dare, I said. She looked up at me. What? I know what's going on in your head, I said. If ever the Emperor reaches us, you will sacrifice yourself. She didn't answer. But before that happens, I'll have turned myself on him to protect you, I said and started walking, leaving her a few paces behind me. I didn't wait for her response because there would be none. Loving her was what got me deep into this mess. I couldn't let the Emperor get to her even if she couldn't love me in the way I would have wanted. Love waits for those who never falter. McQuinstorm Aaron. When I came to, the first person I looked for was Saul. She was lying unconsciously inside the throne room, her back bleeding. As I watched Saul, only one thought kept playing inside my head: I must not let Lamare escape. Once she was in my custody, she would have to bind her son's power again. Where's the healer? I shouted, angry at everyone. On her way, Your Grace, a soldier said, faltering. Make her come quicker. Some things need my attention tonight. Solar and Douglas played a crucial role in my life, and there were many reasons I kept her beside me, but this time, it was only because I wanted to punish her. She stopped me when I was about to go after Lamare and her boy. Saul was unaware of what she did to me, and my heart still raged at the thought. A healer came and immediately tended to Saul. Why are you so slow? I shouted, and the healer jerked. Forgive me, Your Grace, she mumbled. Be quick about it, I shouted. Why am I surrounded by imbeciles? "It is done, Your Grace," the healer said. I stood up from where I was sitting and went to Saul. She did not stir. I pushed at her so she would lie on her back. I did not care if there were still some open wounds. I wanted to punish her severely. When she still did not stir, I slapped her face. The soldiers around me gasped. "Your Grace, if I may be so bold, a lady who is sick need not be so struck," Turno said. "It will do well for your descendants that you learn to control your mouth," I said slowly. From beneath my eyelids, I counted the generals that were still in the room with me. 3 had been sent out on a mission to the other parts of Akea. "Leave me immediately. All of you." Their boots scraped against the floor as, one by one, my war generals went out. "Paterno," I said. Somebody stopped by the doorway, but I did not bother to look up. "Tighten security. Make sure that there will be no more breaches to the palace grounds." "Yes, Your Grace," he said. Before going out, he added, "Do you know that the people are calling you a murderer?" I glanced at him. I did not like the accusation in his voice. Paterno seemed to have sensed my distaste because he added as an afterthought, "Your Grace." He dared not wait for my response. He turned away and left. Only Tehran Aragur remained in my presence. Paterno's was disconcerting. Something had to be done. "Tehran, who do you serve?" I asked sternly and met my advisor's eyes. An advisor and a war general. Tehran's face clouded. "Only a fool doesn't know the answer to that question, Your Grace," he answered. "Then you know what needs to be done," I said. Tehran's face became deadpan. He nodded, bowed, and left the room. I looked at Saul's face, and even as she slept, she still managed to calm my nerves, so much so that it was now an effort to slap her again. But I had to do what I had to do. This time her eyes opened. "Wake up, Saul." Her eyes found mine. "My heart," she whispered and reached out a hand. "Don't," I said, letting go of her. "Get up. We will find Lamare and that fool Dogan. They will take us to the boy, and I will kill him myself." Saul shivered. "Stop talking like that, Wind," she said in a hoarse voice. "You are not a bad person." "Who said anything about being bad?" I leered at her. "I'm not a bad person. I'm an emperor trying to protect his empire. Now get up so we can start the chase," I said, reflecting my impatience. Saul's eyes widened, and then to my astonishment, she cried. "I can't," she said. In my anger, I summoned the clouds and lifted Saul from the bed. "This is your punishment, to watch me as I kill them. You will despise what I am about to do, and will wish you would have never seen it, but because you meddled in my affairs, I'll see to it that you witness how I will kill all 3 of them," I said. Then I willed the cloud to rise, and soon enough, we were floating in the air. Saul had stopped crying by then, but she had also gone quiet. Lamare and Dogan could not have gotten very far. Canella was in the northwest part of Akea, which meant they had nowhere to go but east or south. The south was not a familiar place. If I were a fugitive, I would retreat to the mountains to hide, which was why my gut told me that they had gone east. Dogan Ronda. It had been almost a day of continuous traveling, of our heavy feet trudging untouched routes, and I could feel Lamare drifting to exhaustion. The days had not been easy on her, and I blamed myself partly for chasing her to Bulletin after accusing her of being a witch. Was I thinking? Had I not done that, she would have had some decent sleep and would have been able to finish the scroll without having to work on it overnight. At some point, I may have to ask her to camp, even for just a while. She was biting her lower lip as we walked, probably deep in thought, or perhaps she was afraid. I wanted to tell her again that I would protect her, but I was no match for the Emperor. Lamare told me that she only wanted to claim back what was rightfully her son's. I didn't understand what she meant, though. And also, why would the Emperor order the boy's death? Why in heaven's name was that? I didn't look back after I gathered Lamare, but the skies were littered with lightning, and thunder kept roaring in my ears, telling me that the Emperor had not ended his attack upon the land even after we were gone. For all I know, the palace grounds, the place of celebration hours ago, could very well be the people's burial grounds now. Lamare reached out and took my hand. "Thank you," she said softly. I blushed like a schoolboy. It was funny how the simplest words coming from the right person could make someone feel so special. I looked up at the skies because I noticed that Lamare had looked up also. Earlier, stars littered the evening sky, making walking in the darkness bearable, but now all the stars had vanished. "Dogan," Lamare whispered. "Wynn may have found us." I looked at her, worried. The children are going to be all right, I interjected. There's a considerable distance between us now. If my calculations are correct, and if your drawing was accurate, they would be entering the secret passage to Nivedon when the dawn breaks. If that's the case, then, Lamare said, moving toward the clearing. Don't show yourself, Lamare, I shouted. No, Lamare said stubbornly. If he doesn't see us, he will continue pursuing them, and by sheer misfortune, he may chance upon the children, she shouted at me. I looked for the Emperor on the horizon. Please, Lamare, come back here, I said. This is unnecessary. Wind, she shouted. Dear gods. Wind, she shouted louder. I froze, and she did too. We were both waiting for a response from the Emperor. Any sign? A few seconds passed, but nothing happened. I'm the one you want. I will not let you have my son. She shrieked in the clearing like a crazy woman, or a desperate mother. Either way, she didn't care. To my horror, the breeze blew, signaling that the Emperor had finally heard her. I went to where Lamare was and took her by the hand. We went back under the trees but headed in the opposite direction. I thought we had lost the Emperor, but all at once, from our rear, the Emperor came shouting, laughing like a madman. You can't run away from me, wife, he shouted. What did he say? Wife? Did he call Lamare his wife? I pulled harder at Lamare's hands. Run faster. Please, I said. I can't take him with my sword. Lamare now ran as though she was running for her life. Thank the gods. We hid under the bushes. When there seemed to be no sign of the Emperor, we crept out and found him standing in front of us. How far did you think you could run away from me, Lamare? He asked. Saul was with him. At least she could calm him. But she looked sickly. You can't take my son away from me, Lamare shouted back. Do you think you can protect him? You have no power anymore, Lamare. Your place is with me. Come back to the palace and amend what you've done. Was it treason to kill the Emperor? If he was threatening the one I love, would being charged for treason still matter? I touched the sword's hilt on my waist and prepared for battle. The Emperor's power was extraordinary. If I wanted to take him, I would only have one chance, and should I miss when I swing my sword, that chance would be gone. The battle would end with my head on a pike. Why did you kill Norsum? Lamare asked. Kill him? The Emperor said. Why, I never thought you'd believe that I killed him. Stop lying, Lamare shouted. Saul, my former wife needs you to calm her. Saul's face paled. Your former wife? She asked. Didn't you know? The Emperor asked. After a while, he added, right, I forgot that I wiped her out of everybody's memory. Lamare was the Emperor's former wife? The Emperor's wife? The princess back when I was a stable boy? The memories started coming back. The first time I saw Lamare, she was pregnant. I followed her to Nivedon and saved her. The soft hands that touched my back as an arrow was pulled out belonged to the princess. The signature lavender scent belonged to her. She was the only woman I ever loved. Saul looked as surprised as I was. Where's the boy? The Emperor grinned as he asked. I gripped the hilt of my sword tighter, my other arm ready to push Lamare out of harm's way. Gone, Lamare said. You won't find him. You can't take from him his heritage the way you did with mine. You are as stubborn as ever, the Emperor said. Then he raised his arm, and Lamare rose in the air. The scene was all too familiar. The Emperor bound Lamare with air so she couldn't move. A whip which was also made of air lashed at her. Her shrieks filled my ears. No! I shouted. Stop, please stop. Saul was watching in horror. Wind, if you still love me, please, let her go. Because I used to love you, I would, the Emperor said before laughing like he had lost his mind. Then the air that was holding Lamare up was gone, and I ran to catch her, but she came crashing down to the ground with a loud thud. I knelt to see if she was injured. Credi Sinista, I shouted as grief and rage tore at my heart. I unsheathed my sword and lunged towards the Emperor. As I did, I sidestepped, faked my attack, then I swung. The Emperor dodged my attack and pushed Saul away, sending her to the ground. My sword hit nothing but air. My chance was gone. The Emperor stepped towards me and bound my neck with air. I shriveled under his power, twisting because I could no longer breathe.
Saul Douglas. Wind was dragging Dogan. He lifted him with air and dropped him to the ground several times before kicking mercilessly at his already motionless body. For the first time in my life, calmness did nothing for me. I was swamped with unfamiliar emotions, of negative thoughts. Lamare stood up. She ran towards Wind and punched him with all her might, biting at him while Wind shoved her away. "Stop," I shouted. "Please no, not another innocent death. It would take its toll on all of us." But I was too slow. Lamare threw punches at Wind with her bare hands. Dogen could not help her, he was still lying on the ground, unconscious. I could not bear to see another death. I breathed in and out, summoning calmness. "Please come soon." The concoction the healer gave me was preventing my power from coming back as quickly as I needed it to. Then I felt it. The calmness seeped inside my chest. I walked towards Lamare and Wind, who were still tackling each other. I closed my eyes and felt myself come home to serenity. Wind was choking Lamare, laughing wildly, saying that he could easily kill her if he were not having so much fun playing with her. Lamare was reaching for his face, clawing at his arms. The two of them kept on rolling on the ground, and I only had seconds left before Wind decided to kill Lamare. I had to save her somehow. When I knew I was powerful enough, I braced myself to leap towards Wind. If I could calm him enough, I would push Lamare so Wind would not get choked. I waited for the perfect moment, then I jumped, holding out my hand, calmness enveloping my body. But as I got closer, Lamare managed to kick Wind and push him back, and now Lamare was on top. My hands closed upon her, and she convulsed, calmness fully taking her in. In his rage, Wind choked her further until her body was limp. I was lying on the ground, and Lamare's body was atop mine. Wind paled. "You killed her?" he whispered in disbelief. My mind reeled, my body recoiling at the thought. No. I was not a murderer. Dogen stirred as he heard Wind's words. He sat up in a rush and saw Lamare's lifeless body. He reached for his sword and raced forward. "I'll kill you." He spat at me, his face twisted in fury. Wind moved quickly, scooping me up, carrying me away on a cloud. Did I kill Lamare? No. It was not me. It could not have been. It was Wind who was choking her. Yet if I had not made her calm, she would not have gone limp, and she could have fought Wind. I felt the tears roll down my cheeks. What has become of me? I hugged Wind as we flew. We had sunk so deep into the darkness. The day was over, and dawn was approaching, but with this realization, I could only wish for the night to come again so that I could hide behind the shadows, fully ashamed of what I had done. I held Wind tighter. His hand moved around my waist. He felt me in his heart again. I sobbed loudly this time.